Ever had that moment when your travel plans just, completely evaporate?
Yeah. The worst feeling.
Multiply that by thousands, and you get a sense of what went down at Newark Liberty International Airport, late April, early May 2025.
A total meltdown.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into this multi-day operational chaos. We've pulled together quite a range of sources. We've got news reports from CNN, KRDO, Newsweek, People.com, CBS News, New Jersey, 101.5.
Some local flavor there.
Yeah, and also a pretty raw look from United Airlines Reddit thread passenger experiences right from the source.
No, interesting. And some industry analysis, too.
And some expert analysis from HR Forecast. Yeah.
Right.
So our mission, basically, is to figure out what kicked this whole thing off.
Right, the trigger.
How it spread and, what it really tells us about air travel these days.
Because it feels like more than just one bad week at one airport.
Definitely. And we found some surprising stuff. Conflicting stories about why controllers took leave, the tech involved.
Oh, yeah. The technology piece is crucial.
And these, bigger, long-term challenges the whole aviation industry is facing. Okay, so let's get into it. Where did it start?
Well, the flashpoint seems pretty clear. It was April 28th. Multiple sources point to this big communications breakdown.
Okay.
And it happened at the Philadelphia Air Traffic Control Facility. Now, that's key because Philly handles planes coming into Newark.
Gotcha. So not Newark itself, initially.
Not initially, no. And CNN, along with liveatc.net, they capture air traffic radio. They picked up some really tense calls.
Like
a pilot calling, "Approach, are you there?" over and over and getting just silence. 30 seconds of dead air.
30 seconds in the air trying to land. That's unnerving.
Extremely. Think of it like your phone line just dying mid-call, but these are critical radio links.
Right.
And at the same time, the connection between the FAA radar feed and the controllers at Newark, the ones actually guiding the planes nearby, that went dark too.
So no radar and no communication link from Philly.
Exactly. Double whammy. And this wasn't just a quiet moment either.
Yeah.
Newark Approach Control was juggling roughly 15 to 20 flights right then.
Wow. Okay, so that initial failure, that April 28th incident, it obviously didn't just stop there. It rippled outwards.
Oh, absolutely. It basically kicked off a whole week, maybe more, of just major disruptions. It snowballed.
How bad did it get?
Well, look at Monday, May 5th. FlightAware data showed, get this, over 150 cancellations, flights into or out of Newark, just gone.
Yeah.
And more than 350 delays on top of that.
Just on that one day.
Just that Monday. And the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, they had to step in. They imposed ground delays for flights trying to get to Newark.
Meaning planes were held at their departure airports.
Yep. And the FAA statements were basically saying, look, expect more of this because of staffing shortages.
So it wasn't just the tech sick. Staffing was already a known issue.
It seems so. We even saw reports, I think it was Tuesday morning, that the average arrival delay was hitting 2 hours and 40 minutes.
2 hours, 40 minutes average? Some must have been much worse.
You have to assume so. This wasn't just, a little hiccup. It was a major artery in the national system basically seizing up.
Which, brings us right to the staffing question.
Yeah.
Because that became, kind of controversial, didn't it?
Very. You had United Airlines CEO Scott Kirby sending out this message.
Yeah, I saw that.
Saying that over 20% of FAA controllers at Newark walked off the job after the tech failures.
Walked off the job. That's a pretty loaded phrase.
Extremely loaded. And it got an immediate reaction, as you expect.
From the Controllers Union.
Exactly.
Yeah.
NATSA, the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, they came out swinging, strongly denying any kind of walk-off. Said it just didn't happen that way.
Okay, so direct conflict there. But people were off work, right?
Well, yeah, that's where it gets murky. CNN and CBS News both reported that at least 5 FAA workers did take a 45-day leave of absence.
45 days.
Yeah, right after that initial incident. And the reason cited was trauma. Trauma linked to these recent outages.
Trauma, that sounds very different from walking off the job.
Completely different implication, right? It raises questions about the pressure, the stress involved when the system fails like that.
Absolutely. And wasn't there an academic who weighed in?
Yes, Melanie Dickman. She's a lecturer at Ohio State University's Center for Aviation Studies. She told Newsweek something interesting.
What was her take?
She suggested the controllers simply could not adequately separate air traffic due to equipment failure. Basically, they lost the tools to do their job safely.
Okay.
And so she argued they needed time to, recuperate from that immense stress. Again, paints a picture of needing recovery, not a protest walkout.
Right. It makes you wonder about that walk-off language. Was it fair, given the union denial and these reports of trauma? Seems like jumping to conclusions, maybe.
It does seem quick, yeah. And then there's the Reddit thread you mentioned from United Airlines.
Right. What did that add?
Well, someone claiming to be an air traffic controller posted there. They disputed some wild online theory about controllers quitting because of crypto winnings.
Seriously. DOGE buyout.
Yeah, apparently that was a rumor. But this person pointed to something else entirely. They said a major underlying problem was the transfer of the Newark sector, the EWR sector control, to Philadelphia.
Ah, back to the Philly connection.
Exactly. And this alleged controller claimed United had actually supported that transfer.
So for us non-aviation folks, what does transferring Newark's sector control to Philly actually mean on the ground or in the air?
It means the controllers physically located in Philadelphia became responsible for managing the airspace right around Newark.
Okay.
And the suggestion on Reddit was that this setup was already problematic even before this big meltdown.
So maybe the staffing issue isn't just about a sudden walkout, but maybe fallout from the system failure, maybe existing grievances about how things were structured, plus the stress.
That seems much more plausible piecing it together. It's complex, and the sources all agree the staffing crunch isn't exactly new.
No, definitely not. NATACA, the union, they've been warning about this, saying the controller shortage is nearing like a 30-year low point.
A 30-year low, wow.
And even United CEO, Kirby, he admitted the facility handling Newark has been chronically understaffed for years.
So it's a known vulnerability.
Seems like it. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy acknowledged cracks in the system. He even talked about needing to deliberately slow traffic into Newark.
Slowing traffic down, essentially admitting they can't handle the normal volume.
Right. And then you get that really stark warning from a controller who talked to MSNBC. Just said flat out, it's not safe. Advise people, avoid Newark at all costs.
That's chilling coming from someone inside the system.
It really is. And the FAA themselves, their statements, kind of admit how hard it is to fix this quickly. Replacing controllers takes a long time. Specialized job, tons of training.
Yeah, you can't just hire people off the street. And what strikes me is how tightly linked these staffing issues are with the technology they have to use.
How so?
Well, Secretary Duffy, he told Fox News that during that initial incident, the primary communication channel went down.
Okay, that we knew.
But the backup system didn't immediately take over like it was supposed to.
So the redundancy failed too.
It seems like it, at least initially. And we even heard about a controller telling a pilot, point blank, we lost our radar.
Lost radar. That's like the controller's eyes, right?
Essentially, yes. Suddenly not being able to see the planes on the screen properly, it's hard to even imagine the stress of that.
No kidding. And United CEO Kirby, in that letter to customers, he specifically mentioned serious concerns about the reliability of the tech the controllers are using.
Yeah, it wasn't just about staffing for him. He called out the tech, too.
It's pretty unsettling, the people guiding thousands of flights facing these basic equipment failures.
Absolutely. And Secretary Duffy did respond, pledging a new state-of-the-art air traffic control system.
Okay, good. When?
Well, that's the catch. The estimate is 3 to 4 years to get it implemented.
3 to 4 years. So what happens in the meantime?
Exactly. And you have this background worry voiced by a traveler's partner to CNN about antiquated equipment potentially still in use, especially at that Philadelphia facility.
If that's a known issue at a major hub, why wasn't it upgraded sooner? It feels like this fragile tech was just waiting to cause chaos.
It really seems like a major contributing factor, both to the initial failure and maybe to the stress the controllers felt. And as if that wasn't enough.
There's more.
Oh, yeah. Other things were happening that just made everything worse. Remember the runway construction at Newark?
Oh, right. They closed one of the main runways, didn't they?
Yep. 1 out of 3 shut down for rehab until mid-June. So you've already got reduced capacity.
Squeezing more planes onto fewer runways.
Precisely. And on top of that, the first quarter of 2025, it was the second busiest quarter for passenger numbers in the Port Authority's entire history.
Wow. Record demand, reduced runways, shaky tech, and staffing worries.
It's like the definition of a perfect storm, right? All these factors converging.
It really is. And zooming out again, that HR forecast analysis you mentioned, it connects this Newark situation to bigger trends, right?
It does. It makes the point that Newark isn't happening in a vacuum. The whole aviation industry is facing these, well, headwinds.
Like what specifically?
Significant staff shortages across the board. Not just controllers, but pilots, cabin crew, ground staff, aircraft technicians.
Pretty much everyone needed to make a flight happen.
Basically, yeah. They point out there were huge job losses after 2019, and now you're seeing this surge in labor action strikes, demands for better pay.
Right. We've seen headlines about that.
And it even affects things like building new planes and maintaining the ones we have. The MRO sector, maintenance, repair, overhaul, they're facing challenges too.
Okay, so there are shortages everywhere. But what's the key insight from HR forecast? How does that explain why Newark was so vulnerable this time?
The crucial point they make is about the lack of surge capacity.
Surge capacity.
Yeah, basically flexibility.
Yeah.
Because of years of understaffing in all these different areas, the system has very little wiggle room. When a major node like Newark breaks down...
There's no slack elsewhere to pick it up.
Exactly. There aren't enough extra people or resources ready to jump in quickly and cushion the blow, so the disruption just cascades.
Makes sense.
And they suggest things like better strategic workforce planning, really managing skills across the industry as potential long-term fixes, building a more resilient workforce.
So building resilience for the future. But what about right now? What concrete steps were actually taken in response to this Newark mess?
Well, United Airlines made a pretty big move. They announced they were cutting 35 daily flights from Newark.
35 flights a day. That's significant.
Very. Started that weekend of May 3rd. And CEO Kirby was pretty blunt about it, said it was the only choice to protect customers.
And didn't he say they'd been asking for limits?
Yeah, he emphasized that United had been telling the government for years that Newark couldn't handle the scheduled volume, that they needed to limit flights before something like this happened.
What about the Port Authority, the airport operator?
They basically backed that up, said their own big investments in modernizing the airport. They depend entirely on having a fully staffed, modern federal air traffic system.
Yeah, the airport can be brand new, but if the ATC system isn't working...
It doesn't matter. So they urged the FAA to get moving on the staffing and the tech upgrades, like, urgently.
And did the government announce anything specific on staffing?
Secretary Duffy did. He announced a new program aimed squarely at recruiting and retaining air traffic controllers.
No.
Mentioned the possibility of bonuses, which, signals they recognize how critical the shortage is.
Okay, so money on the table potentially. Yeah, any other reactions?
The Flight Attendants Union, AFA-CWA, they called for all airlines flying out of Newark to cut flights temporarily to ease the strain.
A broader call for reductions.
Yeah. And maybe one of the most telling things, Peter Golsas, he's a former managing director at the NTSB, the safety board.
Okay, so someone who knows safety.
Definitely. He went public saying he wouldn't fly out of Newark for the next 10 days. That really hits home about the safety concerns this raised.
Wow. Yeah, that sends a message.
Even American Airlines put out a statement acknowledging the problem, saying, yes, staffing and modernization are urgently needed.
So, okay, let's try and wrap our heads around this. Pulling it all together.
It's a lot of frets.
It is.
Yeah.
You've got this complex mess at Newark. It starts with a communication failure, likely tech-related.
Right, which causes immense stress for controllers.
Leading to some taking leave, maybe trauma-related, though there were conflicting reports about a walk-off.
Yeah, the narrative got messy there.
All happening inside an air traffic control system already struggling with chronic understaffing.
For years, apparently.
Potentially running on outdated technology.
A dangerous combination.
Then pile on runway construction limiting capacity and near-record numbers of us trying to fly.
And boom, you get this meltdown. Widespread delays, cancellations.
Which, yeah, undoubtedly affected you, the listener, if you were flying anywhere near the East Coast or had connecting flights. Just tons of disruption and uncertainty.
A major headache for countless travelers.
So here's that final thought, something for you to chew on. We've heard about all these interconnected problems, these different perspectives.
The tech failures, the staffing arguments, the infrastructure limits.
What fundamental changes do we really need to make sure hubs like Newark are stable and safe long-term? Is it just about hiring more controllers?
Or is it bigger, like a massive tech overhaul?
Or maybe even rethinking how we manage the sheer volume of flights in our skies. This whole thing, it really puts a spotlight on the fragility, maybe, of the system we rely on.
And raises big questions about the passenger experience going forward.